The galaxy was wide, filled with many stars, many planets, and many strong alien empires. To them, humans were small and unimportant. Humans had no great fleets, no strong weapons, no rich colonies. They were poor, weak, and always looked down upon. Many races called humans the forgotten species, but one human refused to be forgotten. His name was Daniel. He was not a soldier of any army. He was not rich, and he had no great power. Yet he carried something more important: a heart that did not give up. Daniel lived on the edge of a ruined space station. The place was broken, full of smoke and dust. Once it had been a trading post, but now it was nothing but a shadow. Most people had left, but Daniel stayed. He fixed machines for food. He sold scrap for water. Life was hard, but he knew life was hard for all humans. One evening, as stars glowed outside the broken windows, Daniel heard strange voices. They were soft, worried, and unlike any he had heard before. He followed the sound through the empty halls, past wires and broken metal, until he found them. 2 alien sisters. They were not human. Their skin shimmered like silver, and their eyes glowed faint blue. They were young, scared, and hiding behind an old cargo crate. Daniel saw the fear in their faces. "Please," the older sister whispered in a broken human tongue. "Help us." Daniel's first thought was to step back. Aliens almost never asked humans for help. Aliens never trusted humans, but there was something in their voices, something desperate. "Who are you?" he asked. The younger sister shook her head quickly. "No time. Soldiers come." Daniel froze. Soldiers? Here? Why? Then he heard it. The sound of heavy boots. The sound of energy weapons clicking into place. Alien soldiers, trained and armed, moving through the halls of the station. The sisters clung to each other. Their hands shook. Their eyes filled with fear. Daniel looked around. He had no gun, no army, no shield. He only had a small wrench on his belt. What could he do against soldiers with plasma rifles? He could run. He could hide. He could walk away and let them be taken. That would be the safe choice, the smart choice. But he looked again at the sisters. They were young, helpless, and alone. No one else would fight for them. No one else would stand for them. And Daniel remembered something his mother once told him. Even when we are weak, we must still do what is right. So he made his choice. He stepped forward, pulling the sisters closer to him. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The older sister gasped. "You will die. They are too many." "Maybe," Daniel said softly, "but they will have to pass me first." The sound of boots grew louder. Shadows moved across the walls. The soldiers were near. Daniel's heart pounded. His hands shook. Fear filled his chest, but he stood tall. He had no plan, no real weapon, no chance. Yet he refused to move aside. The sisters stared at him wide-eyed. A human, a poor, outnumbered human, was ready to fight for them. Then, the first soldier appeared at the end of the hall. His armor glowed red, his eyes burned bright, and his weapon hummed with deadly energy. Behind him came more soldiers, their footsteps heavy and cruel. They saw Daniel. They laughed. "A human?" One soldier sneered. "Step aside. You are nothing." Daniel did not step aside. Instead, he tightened his grip on the wrench, stood in front of the sisters, and stared back at the soldiers. His voice was steady, though. His heart raced. "They stay with me." The soldiers laughed again, louder this time. They thought it was a joke. A poor human standing against trained killers? Impossible. But Daniel did not laugh. He did not move. He was only one man, poor and weak, yet his eyes held something they did not expect. Fire. The alien sisters clutched his arm, trembling. They did not understand why a human would risk his life for them. They did not understand why he stood so firm. And in that moment, the hall became silent. The soldiers lowered their guns, ready to fire. The sisters held their breath. Daniel prepared for the impossible. The fight for their lives was about to begin. The hall was silent, but it was not peace. It was the silence before the storm. Daniel stood with nothing but a wrench in his hand, facing a squad of alien soldiers in heavy armor. Behind him, the two sisters held their breath, their glowing eyes wide with fear. The soldiers were tall, strong, and confident. They had weapons humming with deadly power. Their armor shone red under the dim light, and every step they took shook the broken floor. "Human," the leader growled, his voice deep and cruel. "Move aside. These girls belong to us." Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. He could almost feel the heat of the alien rifles pointing at him. His body told him to run, but his soul told him to stand. He had made a choice, and now there was no turning back. "They stay with me," Daniel said again, his voice steady. The soldiers laughed, but it was not the laugh of humor. It was the laugh of hunters who had already chosen their prey. Then, without warning, one soldier fired. A blue blast of energy shot across the hall, burning through the wall just inches from Daniel's head. The sister screamed. Daniel did not move. The leader smirked. "Last chance, human, step away." Daniel gripped his wrench tighter. He knew he could not fight them head-on, but maybe he did not need to. The station was old, broken, and dangerous. Pipes leaked, wires sparked, and walls creaked. Daniel had lived here long enough to know every weak spot. He did not have weapons, but the station itself could be his weapon. He looked up. Above the soldiers, a large metal beam hung loose, cracked by years of rust. With one strong pull, it could fall. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He turned his fear into action. Suddenly he threw his wrench, not at the soldiers but at the ceiling. The metal clanged against the weak beam, and the old structure gave way. With a thunderous crash, the beam broke free and fell straight onto the soldiers. Dust filled the air. Sparks flew. The ground shook. The aliens shouted in surprise as the heavy steel smashed into them. 2 soldiers were knocked down, their weapons sliding across the floor. Others stumbled, trapped under rubble. "Run!" Daniel shouted to the sisters. They hesitated for a moment, shocked by his courage. Then they followed as he grabbed their hands and pulled them through the smoke-filled hall. But the fight was not over. From behind, Daniel heard the angry roar of the alien leader. The beam had slowed them, but it had not stopped them. The soldiers were rising again, furious and ready to kill. Daniel and the sisters dashed into a side corridor, their footsteps echoing. His heart raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew the station better than anyone. If he could lead them into the old service tunnels, maybe they could escape. The younger sister gasped for breath. Why help us?" Daniel didn't look back. "Because you need it." Simple words. Honest words. And for the first time, the sisters felt a spark of hope, but hope was fragile. The soldiers were fast. Their heavy boots thundered closer. They were hunting him now, not just the sisters, but him too. To them, a human standing in their way was an insult, and insults had to be crushed. Daniel led the sisters down a stairwell deeper into the broken station. The air grew colder, darker. Pipes hissed, water dripped. The floor was wet and slippery. Suddenly, he stopped. Ahead was a dead end. A collapsed wall blocked the passage. The sisters looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "No way out," the older one whispered. Daniel clenched his fists. His mind raced. He had led them into a trap, his own trap. Behind them, the soldiers were coming. He could already see their red lights glowing in the darkness. Daniel breathed deep. Fear screamed at him to give up. Logic told him it was hopeless. But his heart whispered something else. Fight anyway. He spotted a broken power box on the wall. Wires sparked, alive with dangerous energy. A crazy idea came to him. Dangerous. Stupid. Maybe fatal. But it was the only chance. He turned to the sisters. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." They nodded, though their eyes trembled with fear. The soldiers stepped into the tunnel, their weapons ready. The leader's voice was cold and sharp. "You should have run, human. Now you will die screaming." Daniel took one step forward. The sparks from the broken power box lit his face. "Maybe," he said quietly, but not before you." And with a sudden movement, he yanked the sparking wires free and pressed them against the wet ground. Electricity exploded through the tunnel. The floor lit up with blue light. The soldiers shouted in shock as energy ripped through their armor. Some fell, others screamed, their weapons sparking uselessly. The sisters gasped. Daniel stood in the middle of the storm, teeth clenched, body shaking from the shock. His hands burned, his vision blurred, but he held on until the wires melted, in his grip. When the light finally faded, smoke filled the tunnel. Several soldiers were down. The rest staggered, stunned and furious. Daniel collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. He had bought them time, but at a cost. His hands were burned, his body weak, and the soldiers were still alive. The older sister knelt beside him, her silver eyes glowing with worry. "You cannot fight them all," she whispered. Daniel forced a painful smile. "Maybe not, but I can make them bleed." The soldiers raised their weapons again, stepping through the smoke, and the fight was only beginning. Smoke filled the tunnel. Daniel's chest rose and fell as he tried to breathe. His hands were burned from the wires, his strength nearly gone, but his spirit still refused to break. The alien soldiers pushed through the haze, their glowing armor flickering from the shock. They were angry now, their pride wounded. To be tricked and hurt by a single human was something they could not accept. The leader pointed his weapon at Daniel. "Enough games. This ends now." The two sisters clung to Daniel's shoulders. They wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. A dead wall blocked their path. The only way out was through the soldiers. Daniel's mind raced. He could not win by force. He was one man with no weapons, no armor, and no army. The sisters were helpless. The soldiers were too strong. But Daniel knew one thing. Strength was not everything. Humans had always survived by being clever, by thinking when others only fought. And Daniel had been planning, even while running. He knew this station better than the soldiers. Every hall, every tunnel, every crack in the walls, this was his ground. "Trust me," he whispered to the sisters. They looked at him with doubt, but they nodded. Daniel raised his hands slowly, pretending to surrender. The soldiers laughed cruelly, lowering their weapons just enough to enjoy his defeat. But Daniel was not surrendering. He was buying time. "Fine," he said. "Take me, but let the girls go." The soldiers sneered. "You have no right to bargain. You are nothing." Daniel's eyes sharpened. "If I'm nothing, then why? Are you afraid?" The leader growled and stepped forward, his boots heavy on the cracked floor. The ground groaned under his weight. And that was what Daniel had been waiting for. With one swift kick, Daniel struck the broken tiles at his feet. The floor cracked and the old tunnel gave way. The leader stumbled as the ground beneath him collapsed into darkness. He roared, grabbing at the edges, his weapon clattering into the pit below. Chaos exploded. The sisters screamed. The soldiers shouted in shock, and Daniel pulled the girls back just in time as dust and rubble filled the air. The leader managed to cling to the edge, his armored hand gripping the stone, but he was trapped. His soldiers rushed to help him, their attention split. Daniel saw his chance. He grabbed one of the dropped alien rifles and aimed it, not at the soldiers, but at a fuel pipe running along the wall. He fired. The pipe exploded, releasing a burst of fire and smoke. The tunnel became a storm of heat and sound. The soldiers stumbled back, shields rising, trying to protect their commander. "Now," Daniel shouted. He pulled the sisters into a side crawl space, small and narrow, barely big enough for them. It was dark, tight and full of dust, but it was a way out. The sisters crawled behind him, coughing, scared but holding on. The younger sister whispered, "They will not stop. They will hunt us." "I know," Daniel said. His voice was calm, steady, even though his heart raced. "That's why we don't run anymore. We make them follow us on my terms." The crawl space opened into another part of the station, a ruined market hall. Old stalls, broken lights, and shattered glass littered the ground. It looked abandoned, but Daniel saw opportunity. He quickly began moving debris, creating traps. He stacked broken metal sheets at sharp angles, pulled down wires to set a trip, and poured leaking fuel across the floor. His hands shook with exhaustion, but he kept going. The sisters watched in silence. Finally, the older one asked, "Why risk so much? We are not your kind." Daniel stopped and looked at her. His face was tired but firm. "Because no one else will. If we don't protect each other, then who will?" The sisters exchanged a glance. They had never met a human like him. The sound of boots returned. The soldiers were coming. Their voices echoed, full of rage. Daniel crouched low, hiding the sisters behind a collapsed stall. He held the alien rifle tight. His plan was simple, yet deadly. Bleed them slowly, trap by trap, until fear spread in their ranks. The first soldier stepped into the hall. His foot landed on the fuel-soaked ground. Daniel fired at a light fixture above. Sparks rained down, and the fuel burst into flame. Fire spread across the floor in a wave. The soldier roared, stumbling back, armor burning. His comrades rushed to save him. Daniel used the distraction to strike again. He triggered his traps one by one. Sharp metal fell from above, wires snapped around legs, debris crushed weapons. Every step the soldiers took became dangerous. Every corner hid death. The sisters watched in awe. This was not just survival. This was war, on human terms. But the alien leader had not given up. Burned and furious, he pulled himself out of the pit and entered the hall. His armor was cracked, his face twisted with rage. "You think tricks will save you, human?" he bellowed. "You are nothing but a rat hiding in ruins." Daniel aimed his rifle, his eyes burning with defiance. "Then fear the rat," he said. The sisters gasped as the leader raised his weapon again. The fire reflected in his glowing eyes. The ruined market hall shook with tension. The trap-filled battleground was ready. The human had made his stand, and the real fight was only beginning. The ruined market hall was filled with fire and smoke. Metal beams glowed hot, wires sparked, and the air smelled of burning fuel. Daniel crouched low, the alien rifle heavy in his hands. Behind him, the two sisters hid in the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly through the smoke. The soldiers moved carefully now. Daniel's traps had made them cautious. No longer did they march with pride. Now every step was slow, every glance full of fear. The once mighty hunters had become prey in a broken station. But the leader was different. He stepped into the hall with fury in his eyes. His armor was scorched, cracked, but he stood tall. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Enough of this game, human. Show yourself." Daniel's heart pounded. He knew this was the moment. The leader was smarter, stronger, and angrier than the rest. If Daniel could not break him, then everything would be lost. The sisters gripped each other's hands. They whispered in their own alien tongue, worried that Daniel would not survive. But Daniel did not listen. His eyes stayed fixed on the commander. He whispered to himself, "Stay calm, think faster, use what they don't expect." The leader fired his weapon. A blast of energy tore through a wall, throwing sparks everywhere. Debris rained down, but Daniel rolled aside just in time. His lungs burned from the smoke, his body ached from wounds, yet he refused to stop. He aimed at the ceiling again, firing a shot that made another stall collapse. The leader dodged it easily, laughing. "You cannot win with tricks, human. You are weak, and weakness has no place in this galaxy." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Maybe, but courage does," the commander charged, his heavy boots crushing fire and ash beneath him. Daniel fired, but the alien armor absorbed the blasts. The rifle grew hot in his hands, almost useless. The sisters screamed as the commander swung a massive blade of glowing energy. Daniel barely blocked with the broken rifle, sparks exploding as metal met plasma. The force threw him back against a wall. His ribs screamed in pain. The commander raised the blade high, ready to end him. "Pathetic," he snarled. "This is the end of your kind." Daniel's vision blurred, but his mind was sharp. He noticed something, small but vital. The commander's armor was cracked at the chest, a weakness from when he had fallen into the pit. The crack glowed faintly with broken circuits. Daniel smiled through the blood on his lips. "Not yet." He grabbed a loose wire from the wall beside him, still sparking with energy, and pressed it into the crack as the commander swung down. The hall exploded with light. Electricity surged through the commander's body. He roared, shaking violently as sparks burst from his armor. The blade fell from his hand, clattering to the ground. The soldiers gasped in shock. For the first time, their commander looked weak. Daniel fell to one knee, his body trembling from exhaustion. The sisters ran to him, pulling at his arms, trying to lift him. "You cannot fight more," the older sister whispered desperately. "Please stop." Daniel shook his head slowly. His voice was faint but firm. "If I stop now, you're lost. He must fall, or they will never stop." The commander staggered back, smoke rising from his armor. His glowing eyes dimmed, but rage kept him alive. He grabbed Daniel by the throat, lifting him high into the air. "You think you can kill me?" the alien growled, his voice broken but still cruel. Daniel gasped for air, his body weak. Yet his spirit was iron. "No," he whispered. "We can." At that moment, the sisters acted. The younger one grabbed the fallen plasma blade, struggling under its weight, while the older one steadied her. Together, they drove it into the crack in the commander's chest. The hall erupted with a final scream of fury as the blade cut through circuits and flesh. Light burst from the commander's armor before he collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash. Silence followed. The soldiers stared, stunned. Their leader, fallen by the hands of a human and two alien sisters. Daniel collapsed too, gasping, nearly unconscious. The sisters held him close, tears in their glowing eyes. The remaining soldiers stepped back, uncertain. Without their commander, their pride was wounded. To kill a weak human was easy, but to admit he had beaten their leader? That was shame. One soldier whispered, "He fought like one of us." The others did not answer. Their weapons lowered, their eyes filled with doubt. Daniel, half-conscious, forced a broken smile. "Told you, even the weak can fight." The sisters held him tighter, their voices trembling but proud. In that moment, the balance had shifted. A poor, outnumbered human had stood against power and survived. He had done what no one thought possible. But the war was not over. The soldiers might retreat, or they might strike in rage. The fate of all three still hung in the smoke-filled air, and the true test of courage was yet to come. The hall was silent after the commander fell. His body lay broken, the glow fading from his armor. Smoke curled upward, and the sound of fire crackled. In the ruined market, Daniel lay on the ground too, weak and bleeding, barely able to lift his head. The sisters knelt beside him, holding his shoulders, their silver eyes full of fear and hope. But the battle was not finished. The remaining soldiers stood in the firelight, their weapons still in their hands. Their leader was gone, but their pride was not. They looked at one another, uncertain. To leave now would mean shame. To attack would mean facing the same human who had already done the impossible. One soldier stepped forward, voice heavy with anger. He killed the commander. No human can be allowed to live after such insult. Another soldier shook his head. But look at him. He is broken. His blood is weak. Why waste more lives? The squad began to argue, their voices low but fierce. The sisters clutched Daniel tighter, waiting for the decision that could end them all. Daniel coughed, forcing himself to speak. His voice was faint, yet it carried through the hall. "You think I fought alone?" The soldiers turned to him. His words confused them. Daniel lifted a weak hand toward the sisters. They fought too, not with power, not with numbers, but with trust. "That is why you lost." The sisters' eyes widened. For the first time, they understood Daniel's strength was not only his courage, it was the bond he had built with them. The soldiers grew restless. Some tightened their grips on their weapons. Others lowered them, shaken by doubt. The eldest sister stood suddenly, her small body trembling but her voice clear. "If you kill him, you kill us too. He is our protector, our brother now." The younger sister added, "If you strike him, you strike our honor. You will be traitors to your own code." The soldiers froze. Honor was sacred to them. To attack, helpless younglings under the guard of another warrior, even a human, would mark them as cowards. Still, one soldier snarled, lifting his rifle. Honor or not, he must die. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew they were seconds from death. He had only one chance left. With great effort, he pushed himself to his feet. His body screamed in pain, but he stood tall. The broken rifle in his hand trembled, yet he raised it high. "I am human," he said, his voice shaking yet strong. "We are poor, we are weak, we are outnumbered, but we do not bow, not to you, not to anyone." The soldiers stared. His eyes burned with fire even as his body was failing. "If you want them," Daniel growled, pointing at the sisters, "you'll have to kill me first, and I promise, I'll take more of you down before I fall." The hall went silent again. The soldiers looked at each other, uneasy. His words cut deep. To fight him now was no victory. To kill him would only prove his strength. That one human had faced them all and refused to kneel. Finally, one soldier lowered his weapon, then another. The angry soldier who had wanted blood clenched his jaw, but even he slowly backed away. Their pride would not let them admit defeat, but neither could they erase what they had seen. The leader was dead. The human still stood. "Enough," one soldier muttered. "This fight is over." They turned, step by step, retreating into the smoke. Their shadows faded until only silence remained. Daniel's knees buckled, and he fell again. The sisters caught him, holding him tight. "You did it," the older sister whispered. "You saved us." Daniel gave a weak laugh, his voice soft. "No, we saved each other." The firelight flickered across their faces. The sisters, once afraid and helpless, now looked at him with deep respect. He was not of their kind, yet he had become family. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, his body begging for rest, but inside he felt a fire that no wound could put out. He had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten, that even the weakest human could stand against giants. The sisters laid him gently against the wall, watching him with quiet awe. Outside the station, the stars burned bright. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and still filled with enemies. But for now, they were safe. And in the silence, one truth echoed. Humans were never truly outnumbered, as long as they carried courage in their hearts. The fires in the ruined hall slowly died, leaving behind smoke and ash. The heavy footsteps of the soldiers had faded into silence. For the first time since the chase began, the station was quiet. Daniel lay against the wall, his body weak, every breath sharp with pain. The sisters stayed close, one on each side, supporting him with their thin arms. Their silver eyes glowed, faintly in the dark, no longer filled with fear but with something new. Trust. They had survived. Against all odds, they were alive. But survival had come at a cost. Daniel's hands were burned, his ribs bruised, his legs barely able to move. He had fought beyond the limit of his body. The sisters looked at him with worry, whispering softly, in their own tongue. Finally, the older one spoke in broken human words. "You cannot go on. Too hurt." Daniel gave a faint smile, his voice rough. "Still breathing. That's enough for now." The younger sister touched his burned hand, gently, her eyes watering. "Why? Why do this for us? We are not your kind." Daniel looked at her, tired but firm. "Because right is right. Doesn't matter whose blood it is." The sisters fell silent. In their world, strength had always meant domination. Power ruled everything. No one gave without expecting return. Yet here was a poor, fragile human who had given everything, asking for nothing. It was something new, something powerful. Together they helped Daniel stand. His legs trembled, but he refused to fall. Slowly they made their way out of the ruined market and into the wide corridors of the broken station. The halls were quiet, but Daniel knew silence could be dangerous. The soldiers might return, reinforcements might come. He could not relax yet. "We need to leave," he said. The sisters nodded, but they had no ship, no escape. They were still trapped on a dead station in the middle of space. Daniel thought, for a long moment. His body hurt, his head pounded, but his mind kept working. "The old docks," he muttered. "There's a shuttle bay. If anything still works, maybe we can get off this rock." The sisters exchanged hopeful looks. It was a slim chance, but a chance was all they needed. Step by step, they moved through the shadows of the station. Daniel leaned on the sisters for strength, while they leaned on him for courage. Together they were more than they had been alone. At last they reached the dock. Most ships were long gone, nothing but broken hulls and empty frames. But in the corner, covered in dust, sat a small human shuttle, old, ugly, but maybe still alive. Daniel's eyes lit up. "She'll fly. I know she will." The sisters helped him inside. He collapsed into the pilot's chair, coughing, but his hands moved with practiced care. He powered up the systems, coaxing the rusty machine back to life. Lights flickered, engines groaned, but slowly the shuttle awoke. The sisters sat beside him, holding their breath. Outside, warning lights flashed. The soldiers were coming back. Reinforcements had arrived. A full squad was moving toward the docks. Daniel grit his teeth. "No time for repairs, we go now." With a shudder and a roar, the shuttle lifted from the ground. Dust blew across the dock as the engines screamed. The sisters clutched the seats, their hearts racing. The hangar doors creaked open, ancient gears grinding as the shuttle forced its way out into the cold stars. Behind them, the soldiers burst into the dock, weapons blazing, but they were too late. The shuttle shot into space, limping but alive. Inside, Daniel let out a shaky laugh. "Told you she'd fly." The sisters laughed softly with him, their fear slowly turning to relief. For a moment, the three sat in silence, watching the stars spread out before them. They had escaped. They had survived. The older sister turned to him. "Daniel, you are more than human. You are family now." The younger added, "You fought for us when no one else would. We will never forget." Daniel closed his eyes, exhausted, but content. "Just promise me one thing. Stay together. Don't let anyone tear you apart." The sisters nodded, their voices firm. "We promise." As the shuttle drifted into the endless galaxy, Daniel felt peace. He had been poor, outnumbered, and weak. But in the end, it hadn't mattered. What mattered was that he stood when it counted. And in that moment, he knew something true. Humans were not defined by power or wealth. They were defined by heart. Far behind them, the alien soldiers watched the tiny shuttle vanish into the stars. They would tell the story of the human who defied them, who fought not for victory but for family. And across the galaxy, whispers would spread. A tale of courage, a tale of defiance, a tale of a human who fought to keep two sisters together. The small shuttle drifted quietly through the endless dark of space. Its engines hummed weakly, carrying Daniel and the two sisters far from the ruined station. For the first time in days, there was no sound of soldiers, no fire, no weapons. Only the soft hum of stars outside the window. Daniel sat slumped in the pilot's chair, his body still aching from wounds. The sisters watched him closely, ready to catch him if he fell. They had seen him stand against giants, burn his hands with sparks and bleed for them. But now, with silence around them, he looked simply human. The older sister broke the quiet. "They will not forget this. The soldiers, the Empire, they will come again." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes half closed. "Good. Let them come. We'll be ready." The younger sister tilted her head, confused. "Ready? We have nothing. No army, no allies." Daniel smiled faintly. Then we'll find some. The sisters did not argue. Something about his voice made them believe even when logic said not to. But hope was fragile. As the shuttle limped across the void, warning lights flickered on the control panel. Daniel frowned. Fuel's low. Too low. We won't make it far. The sisters exchanged worried looks. Where can we go? Daniel studied the old star map still loaded into the shuttle system. Many routes were broken or out of date, but one location blinked faintly, a mining outpost on the edge of neutral. Space. Abandoned. Dangerous, but close enough. That's our stop, Daniel said. The shuttle shook as it entered the outpost's orbit. The station looked worse than the one they had left. Rusted, broken, floating like a corpse in the dark. Its lights were dead, its hangars wide open like a mouth waiting to swallow them. The sisters shivered. It feels, wrong. Daniel tightened his grip on the controls. Maybe. But sometimes the wrong place hides the right chance. They landed with a heavy thud inside the cracked hangar. Dust rose and the shuttle groaned as if begging to rest forever. The three stepped out carefully. The air was thin, cold, and full of silence. Shadows stretched across the metal walls. Daniel walked slowly, his steps heavy but his eyes sharp. Stay close. Don't trust anything you see. The sisters nodded, their glowing eyes scanning the dark halls. They moved through the outpost, past broken machines and collapsed tunnels, but then voices. Faint at first, then clearer. Not soldiers, but whispers. Human voices. Daniel froze. Humans were rare this far from Earth. To find them here alive was impossible, and yet as they turned a corner they saw them. A small group of humans, thin, tired, but alive. They wore patched clothes, carried makeshift weapons, and their faces lit up with shock when they saw Daniel. A human, one of them gasped. Out here? Daniel lowered his weapon, just as shocked. You're alive. How? The man stepped forward, his eyes cautious but hopeful. We escaped the Empire. They call us rats, but we survive. The sisters exchanged a look. More humans? Refugees like Daniel? Perhaps they were not as alone as they thought. Daniel felt a spark inside him. If there were survivors here, maybe there were more scattered across the stars. Poor, hunted, forgotten, but still alive. He spoke quietly. You don't have to hide forever. You don't have to be rats. Together we can fight. The man hesitated, then shook his head. Fight? With what? We have nothing. Daniel looked at the sisters beside him, then back at the humans. Nothing but courage. That's enough to start. Before more could be said, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the outpost. The sisters stiffened, fear in their glowing eyes. Ships were arriving. Not human ships, not friendly, alien Empire reinforcements. The refugees panicked, grabbing weapons and running for cover. The sisters clutched Daniel's arms. They found us. Daniel's face hardened. He had no army, no weapons, no plan. Only broken people in a broken station. But he also had something the Empire didn't: hope. He turned to the humans, his voice steady and fierce. Then we make our stand, right here, right now. The sisters looked at him in awe. The refugees stared uncertain, but his fire began to spread into their eyes. The hangar shook as enemy ships landed outside. Heavy boots echoed. Daniel raised his broken rifle, stood tall despite his wounds, and whispered to himself, outnumbered again. Just how I like it. And the battle was about to begin anew.